So a few months ago, I came across this post on Twitter, and this guy, Justin Welsh, said, "Yesterday, my little one-person business crossed $4 million in revenue." Needless to say, that got my attention, and as I started following this guy's posts and seeing more about what he had to say, it started to become more and more clear that this guy was legitimate and that his claims were true. And I became very intrigued by this concept, this solopreneur concept, and Justin Welsh in particular, and how he is growing this business to $4 million in revenue, probably much more now, at a 94% profit margin. So, needless to say, when I come across something like this, I want to investigate and I want to see how is he doing this. And so over the past few weeks, I've been digging into Justin Welsh's business. By the way, when I do these, it's really for the purpose of like seeing how can I implement these strategies in my business, right? And I want to share them so that other people can see, things that are legitimate, that I've picked apart, that I've tested to see if they really work, right? And Justin Welsh is legitimate. If you're a solopreneur, if you're an entrepreneur and you're not following Justin Welsh, you should be. I've had some interactions with him on Twitter. Very cool guy. Legitimate. Doing really cool things. This deep dive into his business, figuring out how he's doing this and what he's doing and why he's doing it, has just elevated my respect for this guy just tremendously. Just a really, really incredible entrepreneur. So in this video, I'm going to break down what Justin is doing, how he's getting these types of results, why he's doing it, and the principles that you can implement and apply in your business. Putting this together, I had a lot of fun. I recently did one of these on Alex Hormozi's Business Growth on YouTube. It's so fascinating to see different business models and how they work, right? And I just had an absolute blast putting this together. I can't wait to share this with you. So let's start by jumping over here. In this video, I'm going to share how Justin Welsh built a $4 million business on LinkedIn and Twitter. Now X.com, I think. So what are the stats? Let's start off with where he's at. So currently, Twitter followers, a little more than 400,000. LinkedIn followers, a little more than 400,000. No doubt some overlap, right? It's a lot of followers. It's a really big account. Email list, 150,000. You have the opportunity. You can sponsor his email list or his newsletter. Amazing content. It's one of the core pieces we're going to talk about. And as he said in that video, 94% profit margin. Now, one of the things I've noticed recently is that Justin was doing everything organically, which makes this even more impressive. However, I did not include anything about his paid advertising, mainly because when I do something like this, I like to see kind of how did they start, right? It's just like I said in the Alex Hormozi video, I want to see what he was doing early on, because depending on where I'm at, I want to be doing what he was doing when he was at the same stage that I am, right? So with Justin, the advertising, the paid ads is really a more recent development. And so because of that, I did not add his paid advertising strategy into this video. So with that being said, let's dive in. So as I was going through this, the first thing that I want to note, I kept thinking of this quote. It's a famous quote, one of my favorite quotes by Bruce Lee. It says, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks but once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." I've always taken this quote to mean somebody who's focused on the basics, right? Somebody who's mastered the basics. And as I was going through this just kept ringing in my head, right? When I look at Justin, when I started looking at what he was doing, the process seems overwhelmingly simple, right? It seems very basic. And what I see is a mastery of the basics, right? I see somebody who's broken everything down to its most basic form and has truly mastered the basics. And so when we look at this, this is just what kept going through my head is I'm seeing somebody who's mastered 10,000 kicks, right? So some of the key takeaways from observing Justin Welsh and his business is focus on mastering the basics. Number one thing, I just kept being in amazement at seeing the simplicity of some of the things that he did, but how incredibly he executed them. He executes on many of these things better than anybody I've ever seen. And that is powerful. That's a really powerful lesson. The other thing that I noticed about Justin is he is a master of positioning himself and of leverage. So many times you see something and you think, well, doesn't it have to be this way? Everybody's doing it that way. Don't we have to do it this way? Justin is a contrarian. He looks at it and he's like, he may look at it and say, well, everybody's doing it this way. Well, why? Like, it's too complicated, right? He's simplified it. And he really relies, again, on core basic principles just of business in general. One of those things being positioning and personal branding, how he's branded himself, positions himself very well. We're going to talk about that. And the other thing is how he leverages social proof. Incredible. One other thing that's very unique about his model is he views his business as a solopreneur business, right? It's a one-man show. He's running it. He's looking for something that he can do basically part-time, make millions of dollars from by focusing on the basics and not have to spend a lot of time working directly with clients. That's his concept. He cares more about the freedom than he cares about the money. So one of the things that he's done that's very wise is within this little one-person business, he's created multiple revenue streams. And he adds these multiple revenue streams with low-ticket offers. And it just creates just an absolute amazing amount of cash flow. So again, had a lot of fun putting this together. So what we're going to do, I think what most people would do when they look at this is they would say, here's how he's getting traffic and how it's, how the process works. What we're going to do here is we're going to work backwards. I'm going to talk about this. First, I'm going to show the big picture of what he's doing. And then we're going to work backwards. And I'm going to start with what you would need to start with if you were to build this, right? Build a business like this, right? And one way that's a great start is, I think one of the other ways I got connected with Justin was one of my business partners bought his courses. And just kind of, they were low dollar courses. And he's just like, hey, I saw these courses and, I thought I'd pick them up for us. He's like, I haven't really gotten into them yet. And so I was like, oh, okay. The price of them didn't seem like there'd be a lot of value. They're $150 each course. When I dove in, I was like, oh my goodness, this is packed with value. So a couple things, like go follow Justin. If you're interested in this solopreneur one-person business model, go follow Justin. He's an amazing guy. Buy his products, right? Buy his products. He's super high quality. Not disappointed at all. Felt like we got way more for the money that we put into him, right? So we're going to work at this backwards to show you if you were to build this, how would you start building it after we go through the big picture, kind of the core concept of what he's doing, okay? So with that being said, let's jump back over here to Figma and let's kind of zoom out and go into this core concept of his business. So the core concept of Justin's business is largely around idea generation, right? He's done very well at capturing ideas, basically talking about the things that he's doing and what's working in his business. And what he does is he creates one core piece of content. And for Justin, that's the newsletter. And from the newsletter, each week he does one newsletter. It's called the Saturday Solopreneur. You may have seen it around. He creates one newsletter, and he from that newsletter, he writes tweets and threads that get published on Twitter, and a variation of those tweets and threads get published on LinkedIn. And he was doing a lot of interviews on YouTube. That was part of the strategy, but he seems to have slowed down on that. And so it's a very, like I said, it's almost deceptively simple, right? He has this core piece of content that's the newsletter. He writes that and publishes it every week. And then the other content, the tweets, threads, and LinkedIn posts are coming from that newsletter. And the everything about this, everything is being redirected back to the newsletter opt-in. So at every opportunity, he's redirecting back to either a newsletter article or the newsletter opt-in, mostly the newsletter opt-in, which is why I think he's grown his list so quickly. And so this is very, very simple, but what he's doing here, remember we talked about the basics. This is what he's doing. This is so cool. So his market, okay, there's two facets of what he's doing here. And he basically he's built a fractal. His business is a fractal. This is so cool. Sorry to nerd out. So there's two facets to this, right? We're going to talk about both of these. These are two fractals. So the way that this works is he has his market, right? That's solopreneurs, people running one-person businesses. For that market, he has a product or products, right? But let's just say a product that focuses on one thing that solopreneurs can do, right? From the product and the things that he's doing as a solopreneur, he's creating newsletter content. And from the newsletter content, he's creating tweets, threads, and LinkedIn posts. So the creation of this content goes from the core inside out, right? A lot of people would write tweets, threads, and LinkedIn posts, try to direct people to a newsletter, and then try to direct them to a product. What's hard about starting from the outside in is you don't have that really clear direction of everything needs to stem from this, right? So the tweets and the thoughts and everything can easily become disconnected, and they can easily go outside and your message can become fuzzy. But for Justin, everything comes from the inside out, right? The messaging comes from the inside out. And as a result, his products, his newsletters, and his social media content are always really, really clearly on point. They never deviate. They never get off track. And you know exactly where he stands. His content is prolific, and it's polarizing to this one message, right? You're either for solopreneurship or you're not, right? Very, very clear. Very good branding, very good messaging. Because he's done it that way, it attracts people. So this is how it's created, but this is how it attracts people. People who are interested in the tweets are interested in the newsletter. And people who are interested in the newsletter are going to be interested in the product. And people who are interested in that product are people who are solopreneurs, right? This is key to understand. It's kind of like, the way that I see this is, if you were to create a movie, okay, let's say you were to create a movie. If you were to create the preview of the movie and get everybody really excited and then create the movie, right? Could be that the previews were more exciting than the movie. The movie wasn't quite what you expected, right? And people were disappointed, right? That's what happens if you create from the outside in. What he's doing is he's creating the series, right? Star Wars. He's creating the movie or the series from it, right? And then the previews are from that core piece of content. So if you like the preview, you'll like the movie. If you like the movie, you'll like the series, right? That's the way that this works. That's so key to how he's doing business. And so as people go from social media onto his site and his email list and through his products, they're never disappointed because it's always just more of the same of what they liked originally. If they like the tweets and the threads and the LinkedIn posts, they're going to like the newsletter. And if they like the newsletter, they're going to like other newsletters and they're going to like the product, right? That's just how this works. So this is the big picture of what he's doing. So the first step of this is a website. Now I normally wouldn't get into something like this and be like, okay, we're going to talk about a website. It's a little bit boring, to be honest, but in this case, it couldn't be ignored. Again, because Justin has focused on mastering the basics, and there's so many nuanced things that he's doing with this website that are incredibly impressive. Just for example, if we look at the homepage of the website, for starters, he's got himself looking out, drawing people in, black background with black shirt, makes his focus and his attention draw people in even more, right? Consistent message of what they've been seeing on social media, social proof below it, right? He's introducing himself, telling you how he helps people very clearly, which is important because that's how relationships naturally work. And he's done it here on a homepage. The other thing that I noticed about his website that's unique and needs to be mentioned, again, it's the basics. It's something I would normally never talk about, but his menu on his website is perfectly crafted, right? Perfectly crafted. If you look at the menu on his website, it's structured to build a relationship, and it's structured to tell a story and to engineer the experience that Justin wants you to have. So the homepage here is like you just met him. It's like, hey, basically this homepage is saying like, hey, I'm Justin. Here's how I help people. Here's other people you may also know who I've helped. If you want to join all of these people that I've helped, just sign up here. The social proof element and the clarity of the message draws people in. But maybe you're not convinced yet. Just like if you meet somebody for the first time, you may not be convinced that you want to get to know more about them. But that's where the menu comes in. So the first thing is you may be a little bit skeptical. How do I know this guy can help me? Well, let me tell you about myself, right? So you click about. And if you go to about, you're going to learn that he's done some pretty impressive things, right? He helped build a company to a $1 billion valuation, helped them raise over $300 million in venture capital. Pretty impressive, right? If this guy's done things like that, he's definitely somebody that could help me. So it's the next stage of the relationship. Hey, we just met. Hey, next question in relation, what do you do for a living? Tell me about yourself, right? That's what he's done. So now the relationship is at the next level. Now, what happens after that? If somebody's interested in what you do, they may have in-depth questions about what you do. And so the next level of the relationship may be providing some value. I know for me personally, when I've met people and they're, what do you do? And I tell them, hey, we invest in businesses. I previously ran an agency. Some people are like, oh, that's nice. And that, they don't need to hear anymore. That's great. Some people get really in depth and they're like, well, how do you do that? I've wondered about advertising my business here, marketing my business here. And so what they're looking for is to kind of pick my brain, right? And to have me provide them with value. Well, that's the next step of what Justin has done, right? He has these guides, right? Free guides for solopreneurs and creators. Now you're like, okay, this is interesting. How to choose a profitable niche, how to grow and monetize on LinkedIn, how to make money online for beginners in my business tech stack. Driven by some of the most frequently asked questions he was getting. So when you pick one of these, you may be expecting to have to opt in, but that's not the case. What he's done is you click on one of these to read now. There's no opt-in. He just provides you with value. He thoroughly answers your questions about what he's doing and how he can help you. What I can tell you is by the time you read one of these guides, and I read all of them, but by the time you read one of these guides, you are very convinced that this is somebody that can help you. you're very convinced that this is somebody who knows what they're doing and somebody that you should listen to. And the other thing is that they've provided you with so much value. The thought that goes through your head is, well, now I can see why this guy has 150,000 subscribers. I want to join, because if this information is this good, I want to see what this newsletter is like. And I want to read it when it comes out, right? Especially because these are really in depth. You may think, oh, well, I don't have that much time each week to read this. But with the newsletter, he's saying, hey, this is something, it's a lesson that's condensed into 3 to 5 minutes. You're like, okay, I can do that. Really, really powerful, really powerful. This is almost like the perfect introduction. Now, the next step is on the menu is the newsletter, right? This is where you have the opportunity to opt in. Now, again, similar message to what he had before, social proof by other people who are quite well known in Twitter. Then also this time it's a little bit different. It's not about him. It's showing you what you will get. And it's doing so in the context of how you would probably read it, right? You're probably going to get the email. You're going to open it on your phone. It's not on a laptop. It's on a phone. So he's showing you kind of what to expect, which is really key. He's showing you, again, the social proof that other people are enjoying this newsletter. And so one of the people I was showing this to before I recorded this video, I was telling her, about the prep work and some of the research I've been doing. And she had never heard of him. She went to his site and she opted in for his newsletter. And as she was there, she talked to me after, and she's like, it doesn't make sense. She's like, I just felt so compelled to opt in, right? And that's that mastery of the basics, right? It's all these elements, the simplicity, the clarity, and the social proof that's driving these opt-ins. And it's perfectly placed within his menu if you want to go this direction. Now, you also see, okay, there's sponsorship, courses, and contact. But you'll notice that in the storyline, he's positioned himself well as a guide, right? Which is how somebody like this should be positioned, is as a guide. He's done so very well. And he's given you the outlet of how you can be guided by him, this newsletter. But you also see that he offers some paid things, right? Some sponsorship and some courses. And so you expect that there's going to be products and services that are talked about. So it's not like, hey, wait, I thought this was all free and gets weird. No, it's you kind of expect, hey, he's got more if I want it, right? But it's positioned after the value has been provided, after he's positioned himself, served as a guide in your story, given you an outlet to get more guidance, right? It's in the right place. And that's what's very, very impressive about this offering. Now, one last thing about the website. This illustrates how much you have to ask. He's fantastic at this. This is just a clip from something that's at like the bottom of every page on his website. I counted on the website 17 calls to action like this for the newsletter. And there were at least 3 CTAs to subscribe to the newsletter on each newsletter. As of this recording, he had 81 newsletters. So that means that he has at least 260 CTAs on the website to subscribe to his newsletter. That's a lot of surface area to cover. He's not assuming that people are going to opt in, right? He is making it so that I think he called it in one of his posts, increasing his luck surface area, which I really like. Practicing what he preaches, not assuming that people are going to go to the right place to opt into the newsletter. He is putting it at every opportunity, but he's not pushing it to where it's so much that it makes people feel uncomfortable. He's not doing things like having pop-ups where you can't navigate away from it, right? It's just there when you're ready for it. And so really well executed on the site. And if you were to build a newsletter like this, this is where you'd have to start, right? You have to build the website, which is where all this is going to live. So that's the first thing, and there's some lessons we can learn from that. Now, when we get to the newsletter is delivered in email form. It's branded, you know who it's from. You know, look at it here and you're like, okay, the content is here in my email. I can just read it in my email. What I find myself doing, which I think is really cool that he has this, is the only thing that's different about this newsletter than the one that you get on the site is simply that you can choose to read it on the site, which is what I usually find myself doing. Is I get the email and I open it up and I read it on the website. Within the newsletter, right? So if you do that, you go to the website. The only thing that's different is you've got the number that it is, the title, and you have a picture of Justin. He has, again, his face with his eyes looking out, meet your eyes. He's positioning himself and he's building his personal brand with this templatized graphic that he uses that's just customized here with the title. And so you see him over and over and over and over. And early on in a relationship, the more you see somebody, the more comfortable with them you get. Now, he's going to tell you that the read time on this is 3 minutes, which is like, do I have time? I've got 3 minutes to get value. Each newsletter, remember we talked about a sponsorship, each newsletter he gets 2 sponsors. Now, the way that he positions these sponsors, he says a big thank you to our sponsors who keep this newsletter free to the reader. Now, what that indicates is that this content is so good that if it were not for these sponsors paying for this or having this little section right here, this would be paid. You'd have to be paying for this, but they paid for it for you. That's powerful because it does not feel annoying. In fact, they go from annoying pest to welcome guest, right? You're like, oh, these guys made this possible. Let me just quick glance through and see what they have to say. And it's not annoying at all. In fact, you're like, oh, great, thank you, right? Because you know that it's positioning the value that this would be paid, or this would be something I'd have to pay for if it weren't for these guys, okay? Great positioning of his sponsors. I pretty much always check out his sponsors, right? Because I want to see like who's sponsoring this, who's interested in this, and what value are they providing, right? So that's great. Now, underneath the sponsors, he goes right into the content. I didn't take a screenshot of the content because it's always quality. It's typically like a how-to article. It's very short. It's punchy. It's easy, quick and easy to consume, and it's actionable, right? Pretty much everything in here is actionable where you can read it, and he sends this out on Saturday. So what I find myself doing is I read it a lot of times Saturday morning, and after I read it, I start thinking about how I can implement it because it's very actionable and it's very easy to consume, and the value is incredibly high for what he's doing here. One of the best free newsletters I've read. Then at the end of every newsletter, there's this little section. Whenever you're ready, there are 3 ways I can help you. So he has product 1, product 2, and his sponsorship. This sentence is incredibly powerful. Again, focus of mastery on the basics. Whenever you're ready, there are 3 ways I can help you. Now, he actually has more products than this. Just a couple more opportunities of how he can help you. But he only focuses on the core 3, right? So here's 3 ways I can help you: the LinkedIn operating system, the content operating system, or you can sponsor the newsletter, right? No pressure, easy to decide. You truly feel like whenever I'm ready, I can take this step, right? And those links redirect to the product pages, which are just filled with social proof for the LinkedIn operating system, which has thousands of students. Below this, there's lots of testimonials. And if you click on this button, it's just an order form. You just go and you just buy it. And it's very simple and it's an easy process, and it gets fulfilled right away. It works exactly the way you would expect it to. Then you've got the content operating system, another great product, very clear what it is, sold basically on social proof. And then he has his sponsorship, and you can kind of get an idea of, these sponsors that we just talked about are paying $3,000 to be here. And this is possible when you have a newsletter like this. Sponsorship becomes possible when you have a lot of people giving you their attention. And so anytime you have a lot of people congregating in one place and spending a certain amount of time there, that becomes valuable advertising space, especially if they are of one type of person, like in this case, founder, CEO, and business owner. And if you calculate this out, I don't think that I did the math on this. If you calculate this out, I believe he's basically pricing this out based on clicks. If I remember correctly, it was like 90 cents to, I want to say $3 per click on average, which is, if you're paying for advertising, that's, in the ballpark of what you would pay. Initially, I thought that he was charging for this based on impressions, which also is in line with, standard advertising cost. But it really seems like the pricing is based on an average number of clicks. So when you do the math on it, the sponsorship is very reasonable. In fact, the only reason I haven't done the sponsorship yet is just because he's booked out 5 months. So I don't quite want to wait that long. If it gets down to 3, I'll do it. Right. Great opportunity. Great opportunity. So let's now get into the content, the consistency, and the workflow, right? So we've started with, if we zoom out just a little bit, the website facilitates the newsletter. The newsletter sits within the website. The products are marketed from the newsletter. So again, we see our path here of the newsletter, which is on the website, and then the products, right? Now we need to get out here to the posts, right? And how he's driving people to the newsletter on his website to buy these products. The first thing that we notice here is his incredible consistency. This is from Twitter. He's tweeted every day for 647 days straight, uninterrupted. Incredible consistency. How many people can say that they're doing that, right? Incredible consistency. Very, very key to his success. We see that these statistics show us that over the last 30 days, he's built up, just on Twitter, he's built up basically 20,000 followers, which is up from the previous 30 days. And he's tweeting a lot, right? This is nearly 1,000 tweets over a 30-day period. Now, how are those being broken up? Well, largely those are, standard tweets, threads, and we see that what he's doing is he's replying. So the majority of these tweets are replies, both to people who are commenting on his tweets, and he's also interacting with larger accounts or accounts of equal size who also have his market to gain more exposure, right? And so he's doing a lot of replies, which on Twitter gets you more impressions, gets people clicking over to your profile. People coming to your profile get them to follow you and see more of your tweets, especially if when they visit your profile, they like what they see, right? So it's mostly replies, a few threads, and then tweets. So the tweets and the threads are the content that he's producing, but the replies are him interacting with his audience, which he does daily, and him commenting on other people's posts, right? So these are just some interesting stats of what he's doing. We're going to go into how he's doing it. We see basically what he's doing and how much he's doing it. And we're going to go into what he's doing. So I found this post, loved this post, great example of one of his tweets, high value in just a couple sentences. It says, my 2023 social media strategy isn't complicated. Tweets, two times per day. Threads, 1 thread per week. LinkedIn posts, 2 times per day. Weekly newsletter, 1 time per week. Then each morning I spend 45 minutes interacting with people. Join me for 1 year and watch how your network improves in 2023. So he's basically saying, here's what I'm going to do. Here's how much I'm going to do it. This is what I do after that. And then he challenges the audience, right? So the weekly process is actually very simple, like we talked about. Starting with a newsletter, he writes 1 newsletter. From that newsletter, he writes 14 tweets. from the newsletter, he writes 1 thread. And from the newsletter, he writes 14 LinkedIn posts, and those go out 1 thread per week and 14 LinkedIn posts and tweets per week. And then 45 minutes after those are posted, or after the first one posts, he's interacting with his audience, right? And I've observed this. I recently subscribed to his paid Twitter account or x.com account, whatever it is now. And this is what he does, right? I've witnessed him doing it. And you might think, well, okay, hold on, there's an inconsistency here. He says 1 thread per week, but if we look at his stats, we're seeing 28 threads. I'm going to talk about what the difference or the discrepancy is there in just a minute as we get deeper into the social media strategy. Before we do that, again, back to this basic principle of continuing to ask. As of this recording, Justin has 22,000 posts on Twitter. A high percentage of those posts, let's say 60%, which I would say is low, direct people back to his newsletter. That means that he could have asked people to join his newsletter at least 13,200 times or more on Twitter alone. That is a lot of backlinks. He is constantly creating a path to his newsletter, to his opt-in. Right? So let's look at what that process looks like. Let's start with Twitter. We see his profile here. We see he has a lot of subscribers, a lot of followers, right? Each day, he writes a tweet or a thread. Here's an example of a thread, right? So he opens a thread, provides value, and, if you like the thread, you're probably going to like what he has to say in the newsletter. Now, we touched on why is it that it says that there's 28 threads when he said that he was doing only 1 per week, right? Wouldn't that be 4 threads? And this is why. Whether this was a tweet or a thread, the process is basically the same. If his tweet or his thread get a certain amount of engagement, he's using a tool called Hype Fury. And so let's say that it gets 100 retweets, right? Then Hype Fury is designed to automatically nest this other tweet below it with a call to action to opt into his newsletter. And basically what happens here is when this happens, right? When this is triggered by people either liking his post or his thread or people retweeting his post or his thread, when one of those things happen, Hype Fury goes and posts this as a reply basically to the thread underneath the thread or underneath the tweet. Now, if it's a standard tweet and it hits this and it triggers that, well, then guess what? It becomes a thread, right? So we see that most of his tweets that he's producing are hitting those metrics of something that he considers a good tweet, and this is being added to those, right? Added to those tweets to bring people back and direct them to the newsletter, right? Just constantly. So my estimate here of 60% is probably very low. It's probably more like 90%, right? Then with all of these, right, he has it so that it automatically adds one of two things, which again, very basic, very simple. If he's talking about a recent newsletter article and sharing information about it, right? So maybe it's he posts his newsletter on Saturday. It's currently Sunday. He may provide some value from the newsletter and basically say, hey, if you were interested in this, here's a link where I talked about this more, and I shared this with 150,000 people. He sends them right to the newsletter to provide them value, the recent issue. The other thing that he does, and this is if the newsletter has not come out yet for that week, he's directing them to this opt-in page, which you'll notice is just a little bit different than the one that's on the site, right? The one on the site, it's got the same message, but it has the phone and it has the testimonials and the opt-in off to the left-hand side. And the menu, this one here has has no menu, right? Has the brand, the Saturday Solopreneur, centered, right, focused on the opt-in. Even the headline and everything are directing everything to the opt-in. And then this one has more social proof. So this one, it just has a lot of testimonials on it. And a lot of the testimonials are other big hitters, people who have large followings that really legitimize this and position it well. And this is just a little bit different on the messaging, but it's still the same core message, right? And then when they opt in, they start getting the copy of the newsletter either in their email or they can visit the site to get it. Now, basically, the same thing happens on LinkedIn. It's the exact same process. He's got his LinkedIn profile. He's got a lot of followers. He puts up the post with a link. This one, he says, start building with this simple guide. So this particular post went to this article, right? But a lot of times he's also doing it where he'll put up a post and below that post, he directs them to his newsletter. So let's just look at that real quick on LinkedIn, just so you can see an example of what that looks like. Can't talk. So if we go down here to his posts, let's see if we can find one. Okay. So let's see where this directs. So he's got a link. This one directs to a little bit older, last week's article, basically. And so he's frequently directing to an article, to one of the newsletters themselves. Let's see what this one is. Probably another article. I noticed that he tends to direct people more to articles on LinkedIn than he does the opt-in. But he also, puts the opt-in underneath the comments like he does on Twitter. Let's see this one too, just so we can get an idea. Again, to the article, right? Probably at this point, I know he's recently done some things with, he's recently done more with SEO. So he's probably trying to drive a little bit more traffic. Let's try one more. So it seems like on LinkedIn, he's doing more with directing them right to the article, right? So, fascinating study to look at, fascinating example to look at. Ultimately, somebody who's doing things that are very simple, that a lot of times you wouldn't see a coach or a consultant telling people, don't do this complicated thing, do this simple thing. But that's essentially what Justin's done. He's taken things that are simple and he's done them better than anybody else, and he's mastered them. And because of seeing this and the amount of traffic and reach that he's getting, I think we have no doubt that he's easily built a business that's doing $4 million in revenue and will continue to build especially now that he's added paid advertising into it. So if you like this video and you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below this video. And it'd be really great if you liked it. And if you have any questions, go ahead and comment. You can check out my newsletter and see how I've implemented this strategy in my own business, and with what I've learned from Justin. And if you like more videos like this, let me know. If there's somebody that you'd like me to do a video on, or a company that you'd like me to do a video on, put that in the comments below, and I'll add that to my list where I'll break these down and show you how those companies are doing what they're doing. So I'd love to have you subscribe. And any questions that you have, make sure that you put them below this video. I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.